Hello, what is going on, guys? Hockey Guy 1 here. Welcome to my review of Terminator Dark Fate. So, Terminator Dark Fate is directed by Tim Miller and stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, Mackenzie Davis, Natalie Reyes, and Gabriel Luna. So the story is basically just about Rev 9, who just goes back in time to try to kill this girl named Danny, who is just the future leader of the Resistance, and creates this half-human, half-cyborg kind of creature, just is sent back in time to protect Annie from it, and basically Sarah Connor gets along, and eventually Carl, or a different version of the T-800, ends up coming along to help with protecting her, and to try and defeat the Rev 9. So Sarah Connor's character was written pretty well. I mean, they did a pretty good job with writing it for what it is. I mean, everything she does makes sense. Like, she's pretty much hunting for Terminators, and basically that's about what she did to lead up into the main story of it, as it kind of makes sense that she would want to, and because, I mean, it's just that she lost John Connor, so it makes sense that she'd want to go after the other Terminators, and it pretty much makes sense for her character, and over time, she pretty much develops to kind of end up getting Danny in the end as a new kind of, and as well as kind of her trust in Carl and T-800, or T-800, it kind of makes sense how it does that, and it kind of moves her character up and kind of puts her through a character arc. There's Carl, or the T-800, which is actually written pretty well, as obviously it's kind of the person who ended up killing John, but also is kind of put him through like an actual personality. I mean, they humanized him, and it really did a good job with humanizing the character. I mean, they gave him a whole family to care about, and you can see how much he cares for a family, and it kind of shows how he acts like a human, despite the fact that he's obviously a machine in it. And it's just pretty well done how this character is, and I do find it really good how they wrote his character, and it's definitely much better humanization than they did in Genesis, as that one honestly didn't really make sense. It just pretty much just became friends with Sarah Connor in Genesis. But in this one, I do feel like that he does a pretty good job, much better job with humanizing T-800 and making him have a name like Carl, and having a family for him to care about does make a lot more sense for it, as it does kind of put him through a character arc where he comes back out to protect Danny. The acting is just phenomenal. I mean, Linda Hamilton has returned for the first time since T2, and she did a fantastic job in this movie, as she did in the first two, and she's just really feels like the character, and it's just kind of something that was missing out of the last three movies, and I'm pretty glad that they chose her to return in this movie, as she does a great job here, and is just really impressive how she feels like the character still, and really still cares about the role, as it's been more than 20 years since she was Sarah Connor, and she did a great job this time, and as she did in the first two. I mean, it's about as good. I wouldn't say like better than those roles, but she did a very good job in this role. Then, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger is back, and he's good, as he always is, as he's just really good and always feels like a T-800. Just the way he acts is perfectly works for a T-800, and especially with how he is in each role. New actors like Mackenzie Davis, Natalie Reyes, and Gabriel Luna all did a good job in each of their respective roles. I mean, and they pretty much felt like their characters for what they did, and pretty much they did the best they can with what they were given, as they weren't really given that much to do with, to be honest, but they did a pretty good job for what they were given. The action is certainly a step up from the last two movies, as it is actually engaging again and really fun to watch, as the stakes to it are pretty high, as it's pretty much just they're trying to protect her at this time. It's not like the last movie where it's just typical, just the world's at stake, like it was in Genesis, and it actually has some stakes to it for you to care about, and it's really fun, even if obviously it's pretty similar to what the franchise has already done. They still did a good job kind of keeping the stakes high with the action. CGI was pretty mixed to me. I mean, there was the Terminator's looks that actually looked pretty good, surprisingly. I mean, step up there with CGI from the last couple of movies, as it did look pretty good in this movie, as it did do a good job making the Terminators look pretty realistic, but there are other elements of it that I wasn't really convinced with that I'll get into later in my negatives. The cinematography is just really good. I mean, huge step up from the last movies, and it did actually use wideouts that kind of showed the landscape of the scene and really made sense for when they did it. Same thing with close-ups. It made sense when they were showing the characters' emotions, and just kind of just doing it at the correct time, which makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad they did that. Then the lighting is pretty good. I mean, it's lit well enough. I mean, during the day, it's obviously very bright, so they just use a lot of lighting for that, and it looks good. And then for night scenes, when it's actually pretty dark, they use enough lighting, and that's pretty much just how to summarize it. With that said, this movie does have its negatives. Like, the story is very flawed. I mean, it's not only something that has been done, like, at least 3 other times in this franchise, but it's also just completely incoherent. I mean, just kind of putting John Connor's death at the beginning of the story doesn't really make sense. I mean, it just feels more like an excuse to put Sarah Connor in the movie, if I'm being honest. I mean, it doesn't really connect to the main plot of the story that much, and doesn't really connect to it really until T-800 or Carl shows up in this movie. Yeah, it doesn't really connect until that point, and then the story just is kind of all over the place from then. I mean, it's just the usual protect the person kind of thing, and then it's kind of goes to when Sarah Connor and T-800 show up. It's just kind of just a bit different, like they're kind of just stop, and then it's kind of all over the place, and it's just doesn't really have plot lines that connect with each other enough for it to be a completely coherent, good story, and it's also just very unoriginal overall. And the structure is just not very good at all. I mean, the first act is basically just John Connor gets killed, and then Grace and Rev 9 arrives, and that's about it. I mean, it's really nothing really special. It doesn't really do anything new, and obviously, like I said earlier, the John Connor stuff doesn't really connect. And the second act's just kind of, they're trying to get away from Rev 9, trying to save Danny, and something like that, and eventually Sarah Connor and Carl or T-800 end up coming, and then the third act's where they all come together to try and take down Rev 9, and basically, and then, of course, the ending of it, where they sacrifice it, and honestly, it's just a bit of a mess. I mean, it doesn't really connect with each other that much. I mean, like I said in the story, bro, it's just a mess. I mean, they don't really connect with each other that well, and it doesn't really seem like they focused on creating a consistent story structure or even a story, like I said earlier. I mean, it's just all over the place and very messy. The pacing is just bad. I mean, it's only like a 2-hour movie and it feels much longer than that. This movie does drag on a lot during the second act, and it's just really feels long, honestly. I mean, and mainly because the story's immense is what kind of makes it feel long, but it's just that I feel like this is a problem that could easily be fixed with this movie by getting rid of this and making a more coherent story. Then our new protagonist, Danny, is just absolutely nothing special. I mean, she's basically just the future resistance leader who gets Rev 9 sent after her because she's just needs to be killed because of that, and that's just way too similar to John Connor's character, which I get that. You can have similarities, but the thing is about her character, it's just much worse than John Connor's character. I mean, she doesn't really have much of a personality unlike John Connor. I mean, she's pretty much just a person who has to be killed because she's the future resistance leader, and that's about her entire character. There's pretty much very little character to her, and she doesn't really have that much character development, as she doesn't really feel that different by the end of the movie than she was at the beginning. Grace is just nothing special. I mean, she's sent back in time to protect Danny, and that's about it. I mean, her character is nothing special. She's just a half-human, half-cyborg. Her character has to protect Danny, and that's about it. That's pretty much her entire character, and pretty much just exactly what T-800 was in Terminator 2 and 3, and honestly, that's about it. I mean, she doesn't really have that much of a personality. She's just pretty much just isn't protecting her, and that's about it. I mean, she doesn't really have that much of a developed relationship with Danny, and that's about it. Rev 9 is just another Terminator, basically. He's just an unintimidating villain who is basically just the exact same as we've seen many times in this franchise, as pretty much just he was sent back to kill Danny, and yeah, it's just a repetitive villain that we've seen many times in this franchise, and just absolutely nothing special or intimidating about his character or villain at all. Now we're gonna get into some of the things I didn't really like about the CGI. I mean, they tried de-aging Arnold at the beginning. It didn't really look that convincing to me. I mean, it's just doesn't really work like most de-aging, and it does not work, and as well just looks kind of fake, to be honest. I mean, same thing goes for John Connor at the beginning, and as well as just kind of fire effects, and this doesn't really look that convincing to me. That's about it. Dialogue can feel a bit out of place in a few places. I mean, in the whole place where Sarah Connor says, "I'll be back," it just feels out of place and doesn't really make sense for her to be saying this. I mean, she just got there and she basically tries to fight off Rebellion and help them, and then says, "I'll be back" after the fight. I mean, it doesn't really make sense that much. I mean, it feels a bit out of place. I mean, it's just completely random, and it doesn't really sound as good with Sarah Connor saying it. So overall, Terminator Dark Fate isn't really anything special. It's just kind of a mediocre film, but at least I can say it's better than the last three. So I'm gonna give Terminator Dark Fate a 5 out of 10. That was my review of Terminator Dark Fate. What are your thoughts on Terminator Dark Fate? Tell me in the comments below. I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.